sun rises, the mist clears, a red kite soars across the horizon. You've arrived at FarmED for the FarmED podcast with me, your host, Alex Dye. Please do check us out on social media, FarmED Podcast. Give us a like or give us a review, good or bad. Let us know how we're doing. Today, our guest is a TV personality, an author, scientist, ecologist, entomologist. The list could run and run. It's Dr. Geroge McGavin.
Thank you very much.
How are you today?
I'm very well, yes. It could be all the way to the wilds of Oxfordshire through many roadworks, but there we are.
Quite a picturesque place to get lost,
It's
though.
very picturesque, yes. And I look forward to the spring, where it'll look even more picturesque.
Definitely. We are recording this, of course, we're all aware, on my grandmother's birthday. So, happy birthday, Grandma. Do you want to say happy birthday to my
Happy
grandma?
birthday, Grandma. Where are you? There you are.
There
Happy
you go.
birthday.
Yeah. What did Mum get you? Socks, I bet. This is better. George McGavin. So, cast your mind back. Let's go back. All those years ago, you were thinking about a career, what you wanted to do for the future. Why insects? Why is that something that grabbed you and made you think that's what I want to do?
Why insects? Well, I mean, as a kid growing up in Scotland, I couldn't think of anything more interesting to do than learning about the natural world. So at school, there were lots of things I quite enjoyed. There was English and art and sciences. But biology was the main thing. Now, you should know something about me. At school, I had a very bad stammer. In fact, it was probably, by the time I was 14, it was probably off the scale. I mean, it was probably one of the worst stammers you've ever heard. And you might think, well, that's a bit of an odd career choice, George. And it is. And if somebody had come back from now to meet me, or had come back to meet me age 14, and said, right, George, you're going to be a university lecturer at Oxford for 25 years. And when you've tired of that, you're going to become a television presenter. Well, I mean, I couldn't think of anything more unlikely, really. But there you are. And I often tell audiences of kids that because there's somebody in that audience who is in a very similar position to me. You know, in fact, 1 in 100 now adults still have a stammer, and it can be very bad for you. Actually, it can be very isolating. And so I tell that story, and I sort of look around the audience just to see who's going, you know, you know. So but biology was really it. Nothing else interested me particularly. So I did a degree in zoology at Edinburgh University. In Scotland, of course, you were very much expected to go to your hometown university, which we all did, of course. Although I did get a place at St Andrews, but you know, my parents said, no, you're going to Edinburgh. That's it. So, and it must have been my second year, we went off on a field course to the west coast of Scotland, to Argyllshire, and all of my classmates were desperately excited about badgers, eagles, owls, you know, and not
It's charismatic megafauna.
Charismatic megafauna, yes, quite.
Get out your dictionaries for that one.
And not finding them, because large animals are quite rare. They they're hard to work on, as anybody knows, and yet at our feet were literally tens of thousands of wood ants doing remarkably interesting things. And I sort of knew before, but that was really when I thought, well, this is, you know, if you want to understand the natural world, if you want to understand what's happening, you've got to look at insects. They are the main event, and arthropods in general. So, and of course, it's quite true. And the more I found out in my degree course, the more I realised that I was absolutely right. So, of all the species we've described on Earth in the last 300 or so years, 2.9% have a backbone. That's everything from aardvarks to zebras, blue whales, cats, bats, rats, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, birds, fish, us, you know. 2.9%. And invertebrate animals are, 80 plus percent. So, you know, if you call yourself a zoologist or a biologist and you don't know anything about insects, you're really not much of a zoologist, really.
And from quite an academic point of view as well on insects, to my knowledge anyway, insects seem to cover more. This is getting to get science jargon heavy again, so apologies. They cover more ecological niches than any other group I can think of in terms of the jobs they do, the roles they do, things they eat, parasites,
Yes.
predators, pollinators, you name it, they do it.
Absolutely. I mean, a remarkable animal group that's been around for 500 million years. First animals onto land, first animals in the air. They've been around for a hell of a long time. We appear, of course, very, very recently, and proceed to screw it all up. But basically, yes, I mean, insects are the ecological oil, the machinery. They're the electrons flying about. They are why the world looks the way it does or did. Absolutely. And if you want to learn, and in fact, most of our breakthroughs in genetics, physiology, ecology, behavior, you name it, are done from studying insects. Because it's much easier to do, they're cheaper, that you can breed them very easily. Animals are animals, animal cells are animal cells. It's essentially a very good proxy for everything. And in fact, if you care to work on large animals, it'll take you a very long time to find anything out remotely interesting. It'll also be very expensive. And that's just basically why, personally, I find insects beautifully interesting, fascinating, attractive. But look at the general audience, particularly on TV audiences. They want furry, feathery things. There seems to be this inbuilt sort of insects, creepy crawlies, and so you get programs like Big Cat Diary. Well, Big Cat Diary was popular, but my God, it was boring. I mean, really boring. If you have a cat at home, you will know what cats do, and they sleep a lot, and they occasionally eat stuff, and they occasionally have sex, not very often, and you're hardly ever there at the time. And that's it, So they had to edit something like 300 hours of nothing to make a tolerably interesting half-hour program. Whereas insects, well, I mean... Oof.
Here at FarmED, we're very interested in regenerative agriculture, so anything we can do to improve the soils, environments, to ensure the future of our food production, that sort of thing. What can insects do to help on this journey?
What do insects not do? It's very easy to, say, oh, well, pests, insects are pests. In fact, the majority of people, if you ask them to name an insect, they'll talk about cockroaches or, flies or something, or some pest on a crop. There are no such thing as pests. There aren't any such thing as weeds. I mean, I don't use the word weed, except what I'm saying. It doesn't mean anything. There are wildflowers, and there are no pests. There are insects. There are things that might eat what you want to grow. That doesn't make them a pest. That makes them inconvenient. And it might be something to do with the way you grow your crops anyway. So, yes, I mean, pollination is the big one, of course. I mean, there are 20,000 plus species of bees in the world. And actually, if you ask people in the street in the UK how many bees are there in Britain, people really find it very difficult. They go, well, there's bumblebees, there's a few of those. Honeybee?
I've had plenty of people who've said there's more than one species of bumblebee. I think it's just like
wow.
The bumblebee.
Yes. Well, it's a particularly northern hemisphere group, and of course we have quite a large proportion of the world fauna. So we have 10% of the bumblebee fauna of the world. Not that we're looking after them, of course, but that's by the by. Honeybees are fine, but they can be a bit of a problem, of course. I mean, if you ramp up the number of honeybees you've got to produce honey or wax or whatever else you're going to produce, that they can actually have an impact on other wild bees who don't have enough food around. Particularly in urban areas, it's a very big thing now to get honeybees. And a lot of people think that honeybees are really important. Well, yes and no. They're important in some ways, but the wild species of bees, and there's something like 250 plus solitary bee species in the UK that are incredibly important for the pollination of all sorts of things. There's a lot of ignorance around. Where does it begin? Where does that ignorance stem from? I mean, you might actually go back as far as the beginning of agriculture, because for a large part of our history, and if you take 250,000 years as when more or less we were exactly as we are. So if I went back to a hearth 250,000 years ago in a time machine and I picked an infant and brought them back now, they would be sitting here interviewing me or being interviewed. They'd be doing astrophysics. They'd be doing, AI computing. We were basically there. All the rest is simply cultural. And for most of that 250 years, we were hunter-gatherers. That was it. Hunter-gatherer, hunter-gatherer. In fact, this book, which I've called Homo sapiens, is a 1,000-page book. A 1,000-page book. Okay. So for most of the book, we're hunter-gatherers. Each side of a page is 250 years. And it's only when we get to about here, you can see how thin the bat is. This is all hunter-gatherer. 40 pages from the end, a mere 10,000 years, things begin to change. You get early agriculture. This is it here. That's how much it is. And then about 6,000 years, let's go to 24 pages from the end of the book, we leave behind a recorded history. That's when we start to make imprints in wet clay, which we can read eventually. And it's really only on the very last page, this page here. This is 250 years, okay?
Yeah.
This is everything that we call modern history. Yeah, this is the growth of the increase from a few 100,000 to 8 billion of us. Agriculture as it is today, the discovery of coal and oil, and it's going really wrong. But it probably started back in the invention of agriculture, because suddenly you had lots of extra food which you could keep, you could sell, you could barter, you could trade, and that became really important to not let anything else eat it. So we seem to have waged a constant battle against the bugs, as we say, for the last 10,000 years. And we regard them with great suspicion. Of course, there was a very interesting period in the 50s when horror films were coming to the fore. And, you can make aliens from outer space, which look a bit odd. But, hey, wait a minute. Insects, they're the bad guys.
Yeah, giant ants.
There was a
things
whole
like that, yeah.
slew of films, giant ants and mantids that had been frozen in the polar ice caps, and and they were impossible to beat. We had to beat them at all costs. End of civilization, etc. And of course, how many of the films end is pesticides, so that they go, guns won't stop them. Napalm even wouldn't stop them. But chemical bombs, hey, and we're all, and this was almost a way of softening up people to accept the beginnings of widespread pesticide use, to the point that now we're using pesticides which are thousands of times more toxic than the original ones used, and we treat the natural world like a factory floor. Now, we know this is daft, and we've been saying actually for a long time it's daft. But it seems to be we just roll on doing the same thing over and over again. So we apply fertilizer. Of course, fertilizers, it used to be guano, of course, not that long ago. And then, of course, Haber and Bosch invented the process by which you could get ammonia from the atmosphere. And probably 75% of the protein in all of us today is directly linked to Haber-Bosch, process. So in 1900, give or take, populations just under 1 billion, I think. And by the time, we're now 8 billion. And that was all because we were able to produce more and more food more cheaply. And there comes a point when you have to say, can this go on? And of course, some people say it can go on. I am one of the ones who say, no, it can't. I mean, you cannot keep trying to get as much out of the land or out of the crops you grow. You can improve them, of course. You can do all that stuff. But we're now reaching a really difficult point in our history where the effects we're having are absolutely massive and global. Massive. And despite warnings, we're still getting politicians talking about growth, drill, which will end up with burn, and death. And it's very likely that the problems that we face certainly by the time I'm dead, and certainly by the time my grandchildren are my age, it's going to be absolutely horrendous. Now, why are we not doing anything about it? Why do you think?
Well,
why are we pretending that we can solve this massive issue?
Well, I was going to mention that over the past few years, in particular, in terms of regen agriculture, there have been a few things that are certainly a step in the right direction from my perspective, which are you can get farmers get incentives now to plant wildflowers for pollinators, buffers and strips for habitats for various different species, for your predators, for your pollinators. Yeah. Lots of research into things like beetle banks, to lots of ways to, I suppose, reduce the amount of chemical pesticides that we're using in crops by providing, what's it called? Conservation biocontrol, that's what it's called, isn't it? Where you're using what is naturally there in the environment to do your pest control for you.
A large amount of it, the driving force is money, of course. Money. I mean, my the root of all evil, absolutely. But we're used to having cheap food. When I was growing up in Edinburgh in the 60s, I reckon probably households spent a lot more on their free income on food than they do now. This insistence on it being cheap, and then you end up with the hideousness of chickens that can't even bear their own weight because they're bred to increase the meat so quickly, and we're selling chickens at £4 for a bird. I mean, that's just insane.
What are your opinions on entomophagy? So
I used to support
insects.
this. Yes, no. Not so long ago, I did support insect eating, and because it's a very common thing, and everywhere I've been in the world where it's hot and insects are abundant and generally large and swarm often, they are eaten. So I mean, it's not unusual behaviour. The reason it's very unusual in the West, particularly in a country like ours, is because of something called optimal foraging theory, a bit of science, but basically it means how much energy do you get back from eating the stuff you've collected compared with the amount of energy you've spent collecting it. So a family of 4 or 3 or 4 in the UK, if you had to survive on insects or arthropods, would probably spend more energy collecting it than you get back from eating it. It would be hard work, basically. In Africa, in parts of the Far East, you can collect enough calories, insect calories, in half an hour that you would need to survive. So yes, I mean, various sorts of commercially available or insect food which is harvested elsewhere in the world is just as good as meat or chicken, beef, whatever. I have to say, Alex, on bad days I regret my career choice. I really do. And you might go, oh, what? World famous entomologist regrets being an entomologist. Yeah, well, because if I'd studied archaeology or astronomy, the stuff that I loved, the stuff that I worked on, would always be there. I could dig in some sand and find a pot shard, look at the heavens, always find a nebula or something, learn about it. But I picked the natural world. And so for most of my adult life, in fact, all of my adult life, I have been looking at it going down the pan, basically, And I've spent most of my time alerting, talking about it, lecturing, doing programs, saying, this is not right, blah, blah, blah. It's depressing. And most, climate scientists are incredibly depressed.
But you mentioned before that you travelled around the world and seen insects and animals from all across the world. There must be things people are doing to help, to look after these insects and animals, to provide habitat for them, to try and do something.
Yes, there are little rays of hope all over the place. But I think we're past the point of little rays of hope here and there. We need we need big actions. We need people to do things. And we know what to do, but we don't do it. We have COP after COP after COP. We say, oh, yes, this and the other, we must do this. Nothing happens. The history of this whole enterprise is littered with broken pledges that just haven't been fulfilled, haven't been met, or probably ever will. It's almost as if some people don't believe that it's this bad. They just, I'll be fine, they're just making it up, it'll be all right. We'll work at some technological workaround, and this constant bleating about sustainable growth. Well, there are two words you can't put together in a sentence if you've got a finite amount of stuff, and that is sustainable growth. You can grow, or you can be sustainable. You cannot do both. It's like, it's an oxymoron. And I'm afraid it's what economists and politicians, our country at the moment, are doing exactly that. Growth, growth, growth. Guys, this hasn't worked. It's worked for a while, and we've now got to this point where it's no longer working, globally. We need to do something else, like perhaps degrowth, perhaps a steady state arrangement. But we can't keep on going business as usual. It's a disaster.
So if you could get these politicians in a room, say you've got a blank check, they're going to action whatever it is it's going to be. Let's stick to insects just for the sake of succinctness. They can action. What would you say? What could we do? What could we do? What could we start today?
If I could get all the politicians in the world into a locked
room. Keep it PG as well.
Okay, then I can't say what I was going to say. Well, we try. We keep on trying to influence them. We try to keep on changing their minds. The climate bill, nature bill, climate and the nature bill had its second reading in January. Where we've been on about this for a few years now. We want parliamentary legislation in place that will hold the government in the UK to the pledges they've made. What happened at the second reading? Labour blocked it because they want to do growth, growth, growth. So it'll be heard again in July, but by that time there won't be enough parliamentary time, and it won't happen. So it's depressing. It's depressing. You really need politicians who have scientific credentials, or at least listen to the scientists they get help from, advice. But look at Parliament. It's law, English, history, politics, economics. That's the degree, mainly, that's the degree courses that most of these guys and girls have.
So more science in power, you think? Yeah,
absolutely. And I wonder if we're just too far past the two-party, effectively, a system. Why don't we have a citizen assembly where each a constituency puts forward somebody who you think is good, who wants to do what that area wants. Okay, it's equally valid, but you do get into this situation where the time of a parliament is relatively short. The problems that we've got to address are longer term. We need to do it. I'll probably continue saying we need to do something for the next 10 years and then I'll croak, One of the great things about being old, Alex, or being older, is that, you don't have long to go. So I won't see the full horrors unfold. But bringing it down
lovely
to the
message for our audience.
well, bringing it to the very simplest form, we've got to look after the natural world. That's it. We depend on the natural world. We are a part of nature. God help nature. But we tend to live as if we're apart from it. And we're not.
Like we're looking down, we're a separate...
You cannot go on using stuff without the thought that, perhaps that's a bit too much, and yet that's what we do. That's what we've done for a very long time. Is it just inbuilt into us that we just seem incapable of realizing that every species on Earth, is there for a reason? Well, in that it has a job to do. It's part of the whole. And yet, we just, the diversity on Earth has been falling steadily for the last 100 years. In the last 50 years, it's got even faster. Genetic diversity as well is now falling. So, is that what we want? Are you going to sit on top of a bare rock with your big stash of cash and go, hang on a minute, what?
But I think if there is a positive spin I can put on that is that
yes, please do, Alex, please. Yes.
I was at the Oxford Real Farming Conference a couple of weeks ago, and the number of talks there were on in some of the insect ones, there was stuff on insect sentience, biocontrol, reducing pesticides, those sorts of things, and the number of young farmers, young scientists, people of the sort of generations who are up and coming, who are very open-minded to a lot of these things and very, very optimistic and hopeful and want to implement a change. And the number of young farmers we get here at FarmED who come along and they say, I'm going to inherit my dad's farm, I'm looking at how I can do things a little bit differently for wildlife because I know that there's a problem, like you say, and I want to learn a little bit about how I can, do my part. So I think, although things might be a little bit of a crossroads right now, a bit of a concerning time, I think that the upcoming generations, and you must have seen this, you must have seen enthusiasm and enthusiasm.
Bring it on, Alex. Yeah, yes. I mean, there are green shoots, and there are people who are gradually realizing that there has to be a different way forward. But people who buy food, people who pay for their food, have got to realize that things have to change. Things have to change. Yes, we have to work with the natural world. We have to look after our hedges better. We have to use fewer pesticides. We have to use less fertilizers. We have to think about the soil. Absolutely. God, we probably passed peak soil a while ago. So that's the amount of soil on the planet, which is an unbelievably thin amount. So the crust of the Earth, that's the Earth's crust, is about the thickness of a postage stamp stuck on a football. Okay, that's the crust. And on top of that, in some places, not everywhere, you've got this infinitesimally watercolor paint thin wash of soil. That's it. It forms very slowly. It gets washed away very quickly. And as I say, we probably have passed peak soil. That's the bottom line. I mean, that is one thing that we cannot make. And so, yes, we have to look after it. We're going to have to pay a lot more for our food, which people will not like. We're going to have to be less demanding. I mean, in the wintertime here, why the hell should you be flying apples from New Zealand or avocados from Peru or any of the other things that we seem to have to get all the time? We have to have that all the time. No, it has to be available all the time.
We've definitely moved away from a natural seasonality in food.
We've just become so disconnected from the natural world and the cycle that pertains to where we are on the Earth. That has to change. And wastage has to change. I mean, we now know, and it's a fact that's been bandied about for a few years now, that 30%, or is it 33%? I think it's 33% of all the food grown for human consumption never gets onto a fork or into somebody's mouth, wasted, either pre or post harvest.
Which is baffling when you think about how many people around the world are living in poverty and starving as well.
A third of all food. So, I mean, say if you were the whole of the UK, it'd be a great thing if we did. Let's say the whole of the UK went organic. That would be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. You might, for a couple of years, you might see a decrease in your yield of 12, 15%. Yeah, but compared to 30%, 33%, wastage, I don't.
What's your favourite insect?
Favourite insect? Oh, God, I get asked that all the time. Favourite insect? Well, very happily, 5 people around the world have named a new species of insect after me, which I know it's not in the same league as Attenborough, who's got boats and extinct animals and all sorts of things.
It's still the dream as an ecologist or as a naturist. Which one's the one that's not new? Naturalist is nudist?
Naturalist is okay.
Yes.
Naturist, but I'm sure there are some who are both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So these 5 species that are named in your honour.
Yeah, well, one's an ant, one's a shield bug from Borneo, one's a longhorn beetle from Uruguay. There's something else from Africa, and I think that there's a spider as well, actually. So it could be 6 species. But if you were going to say one species, of course, it's the bee. I mean, that's a collective term. Okay, so there's no one bee species that would say, oh wow, that's my favorite insect. But yeah, bees. If you're gonna save one group of animals, well, at least save the bees. God.
It's funny how there's some parts of I think it's China. I apologise if I'm wrong, where they've got no natural bees now, and they have to they have like a stick, and then they sort of pollinate by hand.
Alex, you're absolutely right. That was 2015. That image appeared. It was an amazing image, which should have sent shockwaves around the world. This is a part of China where they grow fruit trees. There's no wild habitat left. Everything's been taken away for growing fruit trees. Pesticides are used extensively. There are no bees now, so all the farmers have little sticks with a brush on the end, and they go around every tree, every flower, and they have to pollinate the trees by hand themselves, all of them. I hope they go bzzz as they do it, just for a bit of more effect,
Yeah, for the authenticity.
Bit of authenticity, yeah.
I've seen lots of research going on to do with little nano drones they can do the job of the bees and things. And you do sort of think with how much money is being put into developing this technology.
That's it. You've got it, Alex.
To replace something that already exists in the natural
world.
We can just help.
Fantastic. Let's do it. Oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine, yeah. AI will sort it all out, yeah. Technology will sort it out. I was on the train a few weeks ago. There were 2 very well-meaning young engineers who were talking about carbon capture. It was very exciting, and they were discussing the various, pros and cons of various carbon capture techniques. And as we got to Waterloo Station, I was behind them, and they fell a bit silent because they were about to open the doors, and I just went, you know what we need? And they went, what? Trees. Lots of trees. They went, oh, okay. Mad person behind them. No, that's what we need. Trees to do it very, very efficiently. There's no carbon capture system currently that is going to do very much at all, and will probably be very expensive. Sometimes we just can't invent a way out of a hole. I think this is probably one of them.
As a way to round off our discussion, let's
I know what you're going to say, Alex. Can we end on a happy note?
Can we end on a happy note, please?
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
What
yes.
can you have sort of touched on this as we've been discussing? What can the average person at home? What can they do if they want to help? If they think, hear what you're saying, and they think, I want to help the insects. I want to help the natural world. What could I do to help out? To do my part?
Lots of people have gardens, and they get a pest controller in to kill wasps. Now, I'm not talking many. There are many species of wasp, and many of them live and lay eggs and other insects. But the stripy things that ruin a picnic inverted commas. They are the shock troops of the insect world. They are the shock and awe carnivores who will clear every soft-bodied caterpillary thing that's eating any of your plants and eat it and angle it into a paste and feed it to their young. They're very, very good at doing that, and they're fantastic. And yet, bees are sort of adored, wasps are reviled. You know, they're doing an equally useful job. And I tell you, millions, hundreds of millions of pounds are spent every year in the UK alone to get wasps out of the way. Okay, if the wasp's nest is hanging in your doorway, you might have to have it moved. But if it's in an attic or a shed, leave it where it is, you know, and it will do a very good job cleaning up your garden of all things you might not want to have there. So, you know, just value the natural world, look at it, learn about it, and then you will come to value it.
Coexist is what you're saying.
Well, that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. We just want everything our own way, you know. We're here. Go on. We don't need you. Oh, we do.
So to just take an interest, to learn about it, to live alongside it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was at Oxford on the staff for 25 years, and I was actually quite horrified at how little natural history the average first-year, student knew. This is first-year students who are doing biology. You know, you would think that they'd be good at this. And actually, I was surprised at how little they knew. And I did sort of think, my God, if this is Oxford, you know, I shudder to think what happens elsewhere. But yes, learn about the natural world. The natural world is what keeps you alive, fills you full of wonder and fascination. And I am looking forward to the spring, which is not too far around the corner, when hopefully insects will be flying around again and doing interesting things, although I have to say they've been rather thin on the ground in the last few years. But, you know, we can turn that corner. When you do things right, when you stop doing things you shouldn't be doing, when you look after hedgerows, when you don't use pesticides, things bound back pretty quickly. And that is the one thing that gives me hope. Stop doing what we shouldn't be doing, do what we should be doing, and natural history, particularly plants and insects, will actually come back pretty quickly.
Great. And if someone had listened to what we just said and they wanted to hear more of your thoughts on insects, the natural world, perhaps in a sort of written format, is there a way they could get hold of?
Funny you should mention that, Alex. There's this book here called The Good Bug.
That's a coincidence, isn't it?
What a coincidence. It was fun to do, actually. It was I wrote that last year, and the firm said, you know, would I do a book which would be a follow-on from a book they did earlier called The Good Bee. And I said, well, let's do The Good Bug. Let's try and dispel this view that insects are, ugh, you know, and say actually insects are extremely handy and very useful. And it's a very inexpensive book. I think it's £10 or something. It's called a gift book, so it's that small format. I mean, it isn't a huge book, but it's packed with wonderful facts about how incredibly useful insects are.
And is it available in all good bookstores?
All good bookshops, and even a few bad ones.
Jolly good. Wonderful. Well, it's been nice talking to you today. We've had lots to think about and lots to work on as a species, I suppose.
Yeah,
so
I'd hand our species C-, currently.
Progress to be made, work to be done.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us this week for the FarmED podcast. Please join us again next time. We'll be having more hopeful conversations about food and farming. Do check us out on social media, like I said. Drop us a review. See you next time.